West Side Decorating Center. Stop in today and visit with them. And a good morning to you. Welcome to hour number 2 of the Art Lewis Show, and we're going to spend some time this hour talking to the man who heads up the Midland Business Alliance. He is the president of the Alliance, and we say good morning to Tony Stamas. Tony, good morning.
Good morning, Art. Great to be with you.
Good to have you with us. I think, as I do all the time, because I don't know that everybody's familiar, because the MBA is kind of a different organization from what we're used to around here, and that is that you encompass a whole group of organizations. So give us a little history of the MBA, the Midland Business Alliance.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that opportunity. It is. It's, a number of years back, community leaders kind of looked at what had been, historically a really strong Midland Chamber, economic development, Midland Tomorrow. And I think, as they kind of looked at the missions and, certainly there was a lot of community leaders who were active with both. They said, the core mission on both of these is the same. How we can help our businesses, how we can help our community to grow, bring people here, quality of life. And so they said, we think there's an opportunity to combine these into one entity. And so they created the Midland Business Alliance, and we have a couple other partners, legacy partners, CBM and MidCon, who do amazing jobs in other areas, and put it under one umbrella for the Midland Business Alliance. And, I always say it's interesting. I think you kind of come into that, and there's a traditional roles and events and things that a chamber will do. There's certainly things in economic development, but you really see kind of the proof of concept in times of crisis. And so you don't have a book on the shelves for a global pandemic or for a dam breach, and yet when those happen, that was the exact, I think, vision that these great leaders in our community had in mind was, look, all hands on deck. How do we help people really that are how do you navigate through that? And I think we've tried to build on that as you kind of deal with just the only constant is change, and what you've got today is going to be different tomorrow.
Well, when you look at your website under the What We Do, you see economic development, advocacy, broadband, flood reduction, attract and develop talent, available sites and buildings. I mean, it's a pretty wide scope, isn't it? You cover a big brush.
We do, and I think they're all kind of critical areas in terms of how we grow our community, and so it's housing, we add that in there as well. And yeah. I mean, they are also, and infrastructure. You mentioned that, and I was just finishing up a call with that. Our friend Bill Schutte sends you his regards, and that's a great example of. Look, we sit in a beautiful setting, but well before the 2020 flood, we've had issues because if you look at a topographical map, there's a great one in the State Museum down in Lansing. You see the elevation to the north and the elevation to the west, and you see why this is the Saginaw Valley, and these rivers converge at the Tridge. And, while in 2020, a lot of it came from the north, people go back to 86, and a lot of that flooding waters came from the west. And so how can we build resiliency? Because that's important for our community, for our businesses to grow. And I think that it is a wide range, but I think these are all critical as we kind of move into the future. And they're oftentimes not quick solutions, but the solutions that are really important for Midland and the broader area.
You brought up the dam, so let's start there. And I know, Bill's involved in that with you guys. The flood reduction and resiliency group, how are they doing, and how far forward have they moved so far?
Yeah, it's really been an amazing partnership. We started working, I think, with the county, with the Army Corps of Engineers, really coming right out of that. And now we've got a partnership there, what's called a general investigation study with the Army Corps of Engineers, with City of Midland, Midland County, and the Midland Business Alliance. And it's not a quick process, but the Army Corps has just been great partners. And what we're trying to, do is look at what some alternatives are to build long-term resiliency. And so that's going to take an extended period of time. We've been fortunate, had bipartisan support in Congress to have the funding for these studies. The administrations have supported that. And so that's been enormously helpful. And really only, a few in the whole state have been supported like this. So we think we've got a great plan of action. But in the meantime, while we're working on this, and we know that's going to be a number of years out into the future, we're trying to do some solutions. We worked with our state partners. We were able to get appropriated through our state senator and state representative dollars out of the state budget that went to the city of Midland to look at, okay, what are some solutions we can be doing now? And some of them were ARPA dollars, so had to be pretty focused because it was a tight time frame, but also some dollars looking at, okay, what if we were able to, keep the water from going along sturgeon or snake when it gets too high or coming back, and kind of looking at some of those types of solutions. So we're kind of doing it on a couple fronts. Right now, can you get debris removal? All of those things make a difference. So we've got funding for that. And then, helping our institutions that were so impacted by it, whether it's My Michigan, the Center for the Arts, trying to work with them. Certainly worked a lot with the Village of Sanford. And so kind of working on a lot of fronts. It's been really an enormously successful. We've raised nearly, through local investors who's kind of started raising the money that we needed to match the Army Corps of Engineers. We've been able to leverage that and raise state and federal dollars, almost $60 million. So there's a long ways to go, but it's encouraging just the support and the leadership that we've seen. J.W. Fisher, Leanne Keller have been our co-chairs, and they're busy in their respective worlds, but have just done a tremendous job.
One of the things that has to do with water, Sanford Dam is pretty much done now, and they're saying water should return next year into the Sanford Lake, Wixom to follow. So what does that mean to the economy and to Midland?
Yeah, it's so exciting. I really can't wait for that day where you cross across there on US 10 and you see that lake back there in Sanford, and it has a tremendous impact. Certainly, when you look at the communities that are surrounded by those, over the decades, those kind of built up with the people. Whether it's out in their boats, whether it's going, people going to the beaches, people fishing. I mean, that's been a part of the culture in the community, and businesses come alongside of that. And so I think that's going to make a huge difference. And I think the great news is that in doing this, I think people have recognized, okay, we're going to get to a solution. I think if people had thought that wasn't going to happen, it would have had, whether it's property values or whether it's, businesses, I think people would have probably been looking at different decisions. But I think they've seen that there's been a plan in place. The Four Lakes has just done an incredible job in doing this, and this really doesn't happen anywhere else. The plan they've put together, and that they've the resources and everything, and certainly there's always going to be challenges, and they're still dealing with those. But it's just so exciting to know that hopefully next year at this time we're going to see people out there on Sanford Lake fully enjoying it the way that it should be.
All right, hang on, Tony. We'll take a break. Come back. We're talking to Tony Stamas, heads up the Midland Business Alliance. We'll talk about a number of issues coming up with him after these notes.
At Crystal Clear Hearing in Saginaw.
With kind of the focus that how do we make sure we're using resources to build out rural broadband, and we've got some technical folks who know this really well, and the goal is to get at least people have the opportunity at fiber connectivity. You kind of like to have a competitive environment, so you also hopefully have cellular, but at least to have some level of high quality service at a reasonable price, which is why the competition comes in place. And so, the federal government has appropriated hundreds of millions of dollars. It's been a slow process in terms of appropriated to the states, and then how all of the dollars generally are going through internet service providers, and so that's who we've been working with. And there are some large companies that we all know, and then there are some smaller entities who are doing a great job that might not be as familiar. And so we've been working with them. Midland County Board of Commissioners has offered support in partnership, and so we were kind of at a stage where people had applied, and they'd identified areas that they've said, look, that this doesn't have connectivity in different regions throughout Midland County. And so then they were looking at making applications to get those dollars to build out, to help support building out the infrastructure. I kind of think of it as rural electrification 100 years later. And so how you kind of build that system out. And now with the change in administrations in D.C., there was some change in the guidelines that came fairly recently. And so, the people implementing that on the state had to take a step back and make sure that they're meeting all of those criteria in a pretty tight time frame. But we've been, we're trying to be supportive. We've worked with having key community folks who are out there who can say, look, this is why this is so important. And the hope is that in getting those, with broadband internet connectivity, it doesn't end at a county line. If we're able to get these investments, and we see that already in a number where it's they're going to look for partnerships, and we're helping not just Midland, but Bay and Saginaw and Isabel, because we're all, you can work around the globe, but you have to have that connectivity.
And how important is it to business?
It's critical. It's just in so much of what we do every day. There's no substitute for, being together in person and meeting in person. But the reality is, you've got a quick half-hour meeting with somebody who's on the other side of the state. Where 10 years ago you drive over there and do that. Now you're almost certainly going to set up a virtual call and do that. And, then there's people that we all know that work with folks around the globe. And you can do that. And, there are people who do that just as individual businesses. But you have to have that connectivity, and so that's why it's so critical. I think when people are looking at where they're going to build homes, okay, do you have the core infrastructure? Do you have that you need? And right now, in the middle of what we would have always thought of that core infrastructure is internet connectivity.
Yeah. Let's talk for a minute here. One of the things you do is attract and develop talent. Right now, in the Great Lakes Bay region, we'll regionalize it a little bit here. We've got Corning coming in with $1.5 billion project, looking for 1,500 employees. And like Semiconductors looking for a couple of hundred. SK Siltron and Bay's looking for a couple of hundred. Dow will of course recover like it always does, and it'll be looking for more people. Where do you find the people, and more importantly, where are we going to house them?
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the critical questions. And, housing is a challenge for a lot of reasons. Certainly not just in the Great Lakes Bay region, but around the state of Michigan, around the whole country. And, when people say, what level do you need housing? I always say, yes. We need apartments. We need, single family homes. We need condos. You kind of need them across there. But where we've really been focused, working with what we call Housing Forward, and Jenna Costa has helped lead that, working with us, it has been what's called workforce attainable housing. There's a lot of wonderful groups working in the affordable housing space and doing great work that we've seen for a long time. And from an economic standpoint, I think when you kind of get to a certain end and the higher end, there's still an economic model. But the challenge is there in that workforce housing is that for a lot of the developers, for a lot of reasons, in terms of cost, in terms of labor, in terms of materials, there isn't a financial model that makes sense for them. If it did, they'd be building. And so we're trying to help, okay, how do you fill that gap? How do you, kind of make a capital stack that makes sense for them to do those investments? Because we talk to a lot of people every day that are very interested. They see the need, they see the opportunity, they know there's a huge demand. A couple of years ago, my son was at the building program at Bullet Creek, and they built a house out there in the community. And when he told me the price point, we must have that wrong. He's like, nope. And this is with students who put in a lot of the work on that. But the expenses in terms of what workforce housing was, maybe 10, 20 years ago, has really changed. But if we can help in that what's called the missing middle, it really has a domino effect, because then you have people who maybe started in the affordable space who are going to move into there, and you have people, and so it kind of helps fill in all the way around. So that's what we've been focused on, working with our state partners at MSHDA, have been really good partners, and just trying to figure out, okay, what are some tools that we can use? Certainly, there's no penalty in this world for copying what other communities are doing, and so kind of looking what other communities are doing, and how can we use those tools here as well.
Yeah, and the problem with, when we talk about affordable housing, when you're talking about building a starter home beginning at $300 a square foot and up, the price quickly elevates out of price range for most people.
It does, and that is the challenge. And so, you've kind of got some legacy programs through MISTA and through HUD, in terms of the affordable space, but really we don't have that same sort of toolkit or infrastructure for the attainable housing. And you'd love to say, okay, the market sees the need and they jump in and fill it. But right now the market case has really been challenging about, okay, how do they do that? Because, as a developer, you've got to, you want to stay in business, you've got to pay your bills, you got to pay your team, and the business case on that. And again, this is not unique to us, but if we can do it even marginally better, I think it'll give us a huge advantage. And it serves, like I said, it serves the whole community. I mean, how many people live in Bay and work at HSC and live in Saginaw and work in Midland? I mean, we have this whole cross section around the community, and if we're kind of providing that infrastructure, we're all going to benefit.
Hey, one of those infrastructures would be nice to have a transportation system that could get you from Bay to Midland and Saginaw easily and quickly.
Absolutely, and that is a critical piece. And in fact, our friends at the Great Lakes Bay Regional Alliance are working on that today. I got a mobility summit, and I think that's the idea about, okay, how can we all be working together we've got legacy programs through our communities, through our cities. How can we really make those? And a lot of times, you get state funding, federal funding, and you kind of have to go through some specific criteria, but and the goal is, the same thing, that, okay, if you need that transportation and you're in Midland and you're going to work in Saginaw, how can you do that so you make it as seamless as possible and as efficient as possible so that people aren't just so frustrated that they don't see that as an option.
All right, I want to leave you with this topic and this question. There's 270,000 people, some of them in Midland County, that do not have Senate representation in the state Senate right now because the governor has simply refused to call a special election. What's the position of the Alliance, and have you advocated for it?
We have, We sent a communication along with Bay, our partners in Bay and Saginaw, months ago, asking the governor to call the election. I mean, this is a bipartisan one that Michigan's Constitution provides that when there's an opening, as we have in this case, the governor shall call an election. The governor has not done that yet. I was pleased to say in today's Detroit Free Press that they called on it, and I know the Detroit News has already called on it. I mean, this is kind of one of those ones where there are a lot of issues we can debate and argue about, and, well, have you considered this? This is one where I think there's a unanimous agreement that we should have an election and we should have a state senator. And we've got a lot of core issues that we're all working on in Saginaw Bay and Midland. And, we've got great legislators that we work with, again, most times on a really bipartisan basis, but not having somebody there is a huge detriment. And it really, in terms of how our system of government is, there's no reason that hasn't been called, and I'm hoping we will hear it called very soon.
It's interesting that it's a bipartisan call to have it done, yet it's politics that's keeping it from getting done, and that's too bad.
Yes, it is. But we got to keep it out front, and hopefully we will see it remedied not soon enough, but very soon.
Tony, thanks for spending some time with us this morning. As always, we look forward to the conversations.
Thanks, Art. Great to be with you.
Talk to you again. Take care. Bye-bye now. Tony Stamas, he is president of the Midland Business Alliance. We'll spend the rest of the hour with open phones, so if you have something you want to chat about, 989-752-6111 is the number to call and be a part of the program. We'll be back.
For 100 years, Forward
with you. And again, next 20 minutes or so, we've got open phones at 989-752-6111. Finished up talking to Tony Stamas about the opening in the 35th District State Senate seat that has not been called for a special election. Historically, the Constitution of Michigan, which the one that was adopted in 1963, requires that the governor has the responsibility for setting such elections. There have been 7 governors since then, Democrats and Republicans. On average, it took 14 days to call a special election to fill over 113 legislative and congressional vacancies. There was one outlier to that. That was Governor John Engler. Took 90 days to call a special House election, but that was because that particular seat was part of an ongoing redistricting lawsuit. Here we are today, 194 days, and the governor has not decided to call for a special election. Also, she does give assurances. Oh, yes, I'm going to call for one. Well, then why don't you? The answer is found in politics. Because the fear is, and this is a recent fear, that they could lose, the Democrats could lose the seat in this 35th district, which is part Saginaw Bay and Midland counties, parts of them. Because historically, while at one time it was safe to say this was totally blue, there were very, very few instances where red triumphed. Well, in recent years, the district has moved more to the purple side. Republicans have gained a lot of strongholds in this region. And the governor is afraid she could lose that seat, and right now she only has a 1-seat lead in the Senate. Now, the reality is, even if she lost that seat and the Senate were evenly split, the lieutenant governor would have the deciding vote, as it is in the U.S. Senate, where the vice president has the deciding vote if it's a tie. So, I mean, the excuse that she could lose the seat seems to me to be a poor one. In the meantime, there's 270,000 people who are not represented in the Michigan Senate. And I keep thinking back to, gee, what founded this nation? Taxation without representation was certainly on the top of the list. And here we are sitting today, you and me, who live in this district, and at least half of us, at least half of our representation isn't there. Should we then withhold half of our taxes? I think that'd be a fun idea. We'd probably all get in trouble for it, but I think it'd be a fun idea. If you don't have representation, how can you have taxation? So, I mean, pressure has been put on the governor in a bipartisan fashion. And Tony mentioned, and I had pulled it out this morning, that there was an editorial board article in the Detroit Free Press calling upon the governor to set a date, get it done. The Detroit News had done it. There have been all kinds of letters written from advocacy organizations. She's had pressure from within her own party. And yet she steadfastly refuses to call a special election. The seat, of course, was vacated when Krista McDonald-Rivet won the election for the House of Representatives, where she now is a member of Congress, and her seat in the Senate had to be vacated by her. That election was a long time ago. Over a half a year. Well over a half a year. And here we all sit without a voice in the Senate. Now, I will give a lot of credit to those in the legislature, in the House, who have picked up the workload, because there are still constituent services that need to be done. So, I don't know. I don't know when she's going to finally get around to doing it. Have no idea, but it needs to be done. Absolutely. All right, we'll take a break. Line's open if you have anything you'd like to chime in on. 989-752-6111.
Mastitis is one of...
All right, we're back with you here on WSGW. This one, I pulled this off the stack of stuff today. We haven't heard much about it in the news lately, but apparently there is some kind of a potential deal with China on TikTok. The president's expected to discuss that this week. He said the United States pretty much has a deal on the sale of TikTok short video app, and he believed that they were going to start talking to China Monday or Tuesday. He says perhaps President Xi or one of his representatives, but he'd be pretty much that he has a deal. He told reporters this on Air Force One. The deal would spin off TikTok's U.S. operations to a new U.S.-based firm, majority owned and operated by U.S. investors. That was in the works earlier in the year, but it was put on hold after China indicated it would not approve it. But that came about after steep tariffs on Chinese goods. Now, does the deal include tariffs and changes in the tariffs? Maybe. Who knows? Don't know. But apparently there is some kind of a deal. After all these years of the potential sale threat being put off and extended, deadlines extended, the latest executive order extended the deadline to June 19th. That's the third time President Trump has extended the deadline. And it gives ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, until September 17th to secure a deal that satisfies the legal requirements. I have now I have to tell you I'm not a TikTok user, so I can't speak in great detail about TikTok. But with the millions and millions of users in this country, it's not likely it's going to go away. They'll come up with some kind of a deal that'll preserve the future of TikTok and all those who use it. And I talk to people who use it all the time and love it. Now, there are downsides to TikTok. Some of the things they've been promoting that teenagers try and do that are risky and dangerous. And, you know, there's a lot of things on TikTok which I would certainly not approve. But that's no different than all the other internet sites. So, you know, it's user beware is what I like to say about the internet. I feel that social media has not been favorable to our lifestyle in the United States. Why do I say that? Because we are more divided than ever, and social media has driven that wedge, in my opinion. And it's not because social media is a bad thing, it's that it can be used in a bad way. There's lots of good on social media. There's lots of education, there's lots of knowledge, there's lots of entertainment on the plus side. Along with that comes the negative side. And I sometimes feel the negatives have had more influence than the positives. Particularly since we all walk around with these smartphones in our hands, not paying attention to what we're doing or where we're walking. We're buried in our electronic devices. And I have some fears about that, because I have a fear, unfounded as it is, that the younger generation is going to grow up not learning how to talk and deal with each other because they let their thumbs do all the talking. You could put two youngsters on a couch rather than talk to each other, they'll have their phones out, thumbing each other. I just think that it's gotten out of hand. It can be a wonderful, wonderful tool